Welcome all to the hunt, and today we shall be hunting the acidic Glavenus. For every single reason that I like the Glavenus, most of them don't apply to the acidic Glavenus. So, let's take this episode to go in depth about why the acidic Glavenus feels lesser to fight as both a monster, a concept, and just a general mathematical sense of how you need to fight him to begin with to make it sure that the fight is well done. So, the first thing that you will see that is that differentiates the acidic Glavenus from the original Glavenus is that the fact that one, its colorization is different, and two, that its tail is also done differently, although it pretty much does the same thing, which is why most of my issues stem to be relatively the same thing for the acidic Glavenus. Like most variants, it's just an upgraded version of, or subspecies I should rather say, is an upgraded version of what the original toolkit was. However, I think the acidic Glavenus does nothing that is too variable to make sure, well, in terms of its gimmick, or at least the conceptual idea behind the fight, that makes it a much more interesting and involved scenario to fight differently. So something like the Puke, which is pretty much a poisonous creature, is developed and that stores things in its mouth to spew it out, is developed a lot more in the core Puke to be a much more interesting conceptual idea. Acidic is basically just like tail is rusted and tail is heated, and the acidic Glavenus is tail is crystallized and tail is sharpened. So it essentially does the same thing, or the same conceptual thing, which is why I dislike it so much. Well, maybe not dislike it, but mostly am very bored of it. He's not an upgraded version of what the Glavenus is. It's a Glavenus, but in the Rotten Vale. And although while it does fit a little bit more the thematic of how a subspecies is developed in the conceptual world of Monster Hunter, it does not do a great service to make the fight feel any more different, which is what I believe subspecies and variants should attain to be. As much as Raging Brachydios is just a bigger, more dangerous Brachydios and has a couple of new elements to it, it is flat out an upgraded version of the Brachydios that makes the fight much more evolving while also having different lore attached to it. Acidic doesn't do that. And again, it's not that it's bad, but if acidic Glavenus was just the normal Glavenus, and the normal Glavenus was like the subspecies of the acidic, I'd feel about the same way as I do about the acidic Glavenus now, which is, it's essentially the same monster with a slightly different moveset, which let's go into a moveset right now. So the main tool kit that you'll see from the acidic Glavenus is that just like the original, once you get in range, it will double up on some of his sword moves, or tail moves I should rather say, which the Glavenus, you do the slam damage attack twice as he was in range. However, what distinguishes the acidic is that he will be doing a lot more of sweeping motion with its tail, making it a lot more dangerous if you don't know how to position properly or don't know how to iframe his moves, which I don't, so this makes this fight a little harder than you would do normally. So as you see, he does a lot more sweeping moves when his tail is crystallized, when it has crystals on it, or you could call it rusted if you'd like. It becomes a lot more hard to deal with the tail, since this again, it will do a lot of slamming motion, however you won't go for sweeps that much. And it makes the fight kind of safe, but it also makes sure that your motion value, your hit zone value are going to be significantly less, than just for the fact that the hit zone value on the acidic Glavenus is kind of shit. Most of his moves resemble a lot of the Glavenus, and it's only when he sharpens his tail that you can see a little more difference. The only thing that's kind of different about his tail moves when it's crystallized is that some of the crystals will spew off of his tail to allow to do some AoE moves, which most monsters just have AoE moves, and most hunter actually dislike some of the AoE moves, so let's not go too hard into it. But let's just say that I'm not that big of a fan too of AoE moves, and it doesn't affect the fight that much. It's similar to how the Radoban like pops off some of his bones off of his basic armor, and it can tumble into you. It's just more of an annoyance than an actual endurance in a fight. It really is. Just like the Effluvium is in the Rotten Vale to begin with the acidic Glavenus. It's more of an annoyance than anything else, to be perfectly frank. So, That's about his normal kit when his tail is crystallized. When his tail is sharpened, it's gonna do one or two separate kind of follow-ups. The main one that you will see is that we will do a lot more, and I mean a lot more sweeping motion. Not huge motions, mostly fairly close up, which thank God, because his range of his tail is enormous. But his most frequent combos, he will slam down just like the original Glavenus, slam down the tail, and from there do his horizontal sweep, making it a lot more dangerous. Also, the sweeping motion, sharpening tails is basically the same as the other one, so it should be a fairly decent way of going about it. The sweep here doesn't throw a flame, which is pretty good, so that is just the consolation prize. He will do a lot of stabbing too, which is different from the normal Glavenus. The normal Glavenus was not stab, but since the acidic seems to be a lot more prolific in its fighting style, you'll find that he'll try to poke at you way more. So those are the main difference, and again, it's just boring to me because it's so similar to the original one, and there's really nothing too interesting to talk about here. However, if there's something that I'm really glad about, is that the Glavenus in the acidic Glavenus shares the same team, which then again, does make a lot of sense. You would want to have the same thing for what is essentially the same monster. I don't think it fits quite as well as the normal Glavenus, just because how can I say this? The red of Glavenus really like helps sell some of those percussion sounds, or just feel a lot more. Then again, acidic is just as aggressive as the original one, it just doesn't feel like it should be the case. Also, that's just I went for a bad play there. I should have trapped him before actually using the Dragonator. So if that's all we got to talk about, then let's look at the math and see if there's anything else we can potentially say about him. So, if we look at the math, again, if we're looking at cutting damage, 38, which is fair enough. The head at 43, neck at 37, throat at 65, back at 45, body at 23, forelegs at 23, hind legs at 30. The tail at the base 37, the usual tail's 37, when it's crystallized it's at 18, and when it's sharpened it's at 65. So if you look at those math, if you look at the math right about here, you'd see that if you look also at the Glavenus charge, which I will throw on screen right now, it's essentially the same thing with a little more resistance added to it. Literally, just here they are, side by side, okay? On the left will be the acidic Glavenus, and on the right is the Glavenus chart. These are nigh the same thing, and I've complimented the original Glavenus for having a weakness to the throat because it was a fiery monster that stores his glands in his throat, right? In the back of its tongue, which is nearly close to the throat, just like most, you would say, venomous creature are on this planet. And I was like, this is a really cool thing. And they also do it for the acidic Glavenus too, which I guess they just wanted to share the same hit zone point because of how the skeleton is constructed, maybe, I don't know. But they still have this weakness. I don't think it makes much sense. And if you look at everything else, the head is stronger now for no apparent reason, just to give him a little more resistances. The body is slightly weaker, but you never go for the body. The forelegs are slightly weaker now, which, again, there's absolutely no reason why that should be different. The hind legs are far weaker, meaning that you, unless getting your weakness 6 point damage on him is more difficult now, since you don't have base orange hits, you will get gray hits for most of the occasion. The tail is the same in every scenario outside that the tail is crystallized. It has slightly less damage. So there's a lot of things here that I'm just kind of confused by as to why they're done that way specifically. Like, I get it. You want to feel like subspecies has something to differentiate them, but the math here does not make that much more sense. The hit zones are relatively the same, the fighting styles are relatively the same. If there's a way to actually fight the acidic Glavenus, it's pretty much the exact same way, except here in the Rondavel, and the slopes are a lot less uncommon. So if you're a dual blades main, that just makes it harder to try and fight you. He's on flat ground. Corridors are terrible to fight Glavenus in because of their huge range when it comes to their tail. He loves stabbing. He's fairly quick too for his steps. Hit zones are more annoying, so you can't get orange numbers unless you tenderize, which tenderizing, oh my god. Listen, there's a whole debate out there about whether tenderizing is good or bad. Most people agree that it's bad. It just makes the game unfun and it doesn't gives enough reward as to targeting and tenderizing a weaker portion of the body to make it an actual weak point. And like, there's a whole debate out there. I'm not gonna jump into it much. If you want me to get into it, fine, we'll do that in later episodes. As of now, it's just kind of like a you know, things happening. We don't really care about it much. So yeah, Ascending Glavenus, final thoughts. If you're ever gonna find him, please use the same strategy as you use with the Glavenus, which is try to use overhead attacks as much as possible, especially since this thing used even more sweeping motion attacks than it. It has a lot of follow-up attacks that you should be careful of. The closer you are to its hind legs, the safer you will be. As soon as you get to about head range to very long range, you are most likely dead. Even though it doesn't have a projectile attack, it's somehow more dangerous just because of its follow-up for melee users. If you're a range user, I believe you should be in a lot more of a comfortable scenario. It just takes a long time because also the hit zone values are just shit on this thing for absolutely no reason. And yeah, just be careful as to how you go about fighting the Ascending Glavenus in general, for you will have a lot of pain just trying to get this thing to fall down. Like a lot of pain, like a little bit too much pain actually. Like it shouldn't be allowed, but it is. So yeah. God damn. If you have any thoughts about the Ascending Glavenus below, if you think it's a good monster or bad monster, like if it should be any different about that, please leave a comment in the description down below. I'd be very interested to hear your opinions about the Ascending Glavenus to begin with. I personally don't think it's a great monster, but you know, sometime you can't get your way. Well, we'll see you all for another hunt.